In this video, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on some wrestling-related topics recently that I want to give my thoughts on. A couple, one or two that's kind of outdated, but I haven't given my thoughts on yet, so I just want to throw that in the video as well. First, I want to talk about WWE moving Smackdown, Friday Night Smackdown from My Network TV to SyFy starting later this year. And as far as this move from My Network TV, from a broadcast TV network to a cable network, that's going to be interesting to see how that affects their ratings. Now, a lot of people are probably glad that SmackDown is getting moved from My Network to SyFy because, for the most part, a lot of people aren't able to view SmackDown because it's on My Network TV. I know a couple people that even have cable in pretty much the same exact area I live in, and for some reason I have My Network TV, but they're not allowed to have My Network TV and not able to view SmackDown, so that's going to be a plus for certain people that aren't able to view SmackDown now. That if they since most people have SyFy, it's going to be a good move for that. But it's going to be interesting, like I said, is going to be a big difference in the ratings since it's a change from a broadcast network to a cable network. That's going to be the interesting thing. And this is actually the first time, starting in October of this year when SmackDown moves from My Network TV to SyFy. It's going to be the first time that SmackDown is on cable television instead of a broadcast network like it's always been, either under the banner of the WB network, UPN, CW, and now My Network TV. And it's going to be switching there. And the only thing I would say is I wish they would have done here, because with My Network TV and on those networks, they had SmackDown on Friday nights for a little bit, and I think that's a terrible night for wrestling to be on. I was hoping that when they, switch networks and with this SyFy deal, I was hoping that when I first heard about it, I was like, please move Friday Night SmackDown to another night. Maybe move it back to Thursdays. But the one thing, I guess they couldn't move it to Thursdays, or they didn't want to move it to Thursdays, even though no one watches WWE Superstars. It is a programming that is a WWE program that does air on Thursday nights at 8 p.m. on WGN Network, so I guess they didn't want to say, let's move it back to Friday and, put it at 8 o'clock and then go against another WWE program at the same time. I guess they couldn't do that, and I guess, Wednesday is really one of those nights that, for some reason, wrestling's never on a Wednesday night. I think last time wrestling was on, Wednesday nights was probably, maybe, I think Thunder might have been on Wednesday back in the day in the, late 90s. I think that's probably the last time, and I think that ended up moving to Thursdays back in the day as well. So they should have, had Friday Night SmackDown moved to a Thursday or a Wednesday, because, that's going to have more people watch it if it's on a Wednesday or a Thursday and a night that isn't Friday night. Friday is one of the worst nights to have a wrestling programming on, and it's just a terrible move to keep it on Fridays, but it is going to be interesting to see how this changes, from a broadcast network perspective to a cable network, see what changes with that. And, hopefully with this, SmackDown, maybe, gets a little more viewership, because I know certain people that, want to check SmackDown out that don't have My Network TV, they're probably glad of this situation. And, stuff like, DVRs and TiVos and stuff like that, even if you're not home on Friday nights, you can just set your DVR, set a TiVo, and just watch, SmackDown later that evening and watch it that way, which I think most people that view SmackDown probably either watch it that way or watch it on YouTube or either download SmackDown. That's probably a lot of their people that view SmackDown view it that way. Now, let me get on to next two things. They're going to be kind of a little too outdated things, but I'm talking about them since I haven't given my thoughts on them. First being Jack Swagger cashing in the Money in the Bank briefcase and defeating Jericho for the World Heavyweight Championship. My thoughts on this: I think it's a good move to have him as World Heavyweight Champion. I do like it, but the one problem I have with it is might have been a little too early for him to cash in. But understanding the reason why they probably had him cashing in so early is because you got to think WWE, they're doing the Money in the Bank pay-per-view coming in July, and they probably just thought of the idea, let's have the person that wins this Money in the Bank. In this case, it was Jack Swagger, which was a shocker in the nature already that no one thought Jack Swagger was going to be the one not cashing in, but winning the Money in the Bank match at WrestleMania 26. And then I don't think anyone thought he was going to cash in this early, but like I said, the main reason why they had him probably cashing in so early is because of the Money in the Bank pay-per-view that's coming in July, and they just wanted to get the briefcase and all that thing over with before the pay-per-view, the pay-per-view. They didn't want to have him keep it right up until the pay-per-view. Then people were like, okay, someone just had a briefcase the month before or a couple weeks before the pay-per-view. They wanted to get rid of it pretty much like 3 months in advance and just have him win the title. Now, it's going to be interesting to see if they have him walk out the Extreme Rules pay-per-view as World Heavyweight Champion still with his match against Randy Orton. Now, I'm thinking they probably will have him walk out as champion at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, just in the case that building up to this match with Randy Orton has defeated Jack Swagger 2 times already prior to the match they're going to have at Extreme Rules. And that right there just makes it seem like Swagger is definitely going to walk out as champion, because if Randy Orton defeats Jack Swagger for the World Heavyweight Championship at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, it's going to be pretty much burying Jack Swagger and just destroying him, and with that, pretty much dropping him already back down to the mid-card, which I don't think they would do. I don't think he's going to have a long title run. Like, I'll be surprised if he keeps it past June. That's probably the longest I expect him to have it, is probably till like the middle or end of June. That's probably the latest I'll see him having it, but I think he will walk out of the Extreme Rules pay-per-view as World Heavyweight Champion still. His match with Randy Orton probably will be pretty good. It'll probably be a good wrestling match with them too. Then the next topic, like I said, with the Jack Swagger thing, a little outdated, but I have to give my thoughts on it since I haven't given my thoughts on it yet, is obviously, when I gave my review of ROH The Big Bang pay-per-view, I mentioned Christopher Daniels, re-debuting with Ring of Honor and coming back to Ring of Honor on there, but when I gave my review on that, I wasn't sure what Christopher Daniels' TNA contractual status was. Obviously, we already know about a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago now probably, that his TNA contract is over. He's released from TNA, and he's going to be working full-time in Ring of Honor now, which TNA's loss is going to be Ring of Honor's gain, but it's just a terrible move for TNA to release Christopher Daniels. 2 stars that TNA has released probably within the last month or so, that 2 stars I think that really are huge losses for TNA, in the sense that they could have been huge stars for TNA, and TNA never used them to the full capability that they could. First being Awesome Kong. Obviously, we already know why she got released from TNA, because the whole Bubba the Love Sponge incident about the Haiti comment and her getting in a fight with Bubba backstage, and that's pretty much the reason why she got fired from TNA. And Christopher Daniels being gone as well. You had Kong. That could have been someone great for the women's division. Now, I think, back when she had her feud with Gail Kim, I think TNA was using her to her full abilities, but pretty much, since the Gail Kim feud ended, they really haven't done much with Awesome Kong and TNA to the level that they should have. I mean, she could have been one of the top stars in the Knockouts division and really, been the star to really, make that Knockouts division seem completely different from the WWE Divas division, which pretty much probably over the last year or so in TNA turned something like the Knockouts division, something that was actually kind of seeming different than the mainstream women's wrestling and completely different from the Divas wrestling in WWE, the WWE Divas, and making it pretty much the same thing as WWE, pretty much WWE Light. That's pretty much what the Knockouts division has turned into, and they just did a terrible job with Kong. Christopher Daniels is someone that is probably one of the most underutilized stars in wrestling. I would say back in the 90s, the one star that was really like one star that should have made made it in some company, WWE or WCW back in the day, was Jerry Lynn, and especially after ECW closed and WCW closed, and he got into WWE. He was one star that should have, made it within WWE, and they should have used him back in the day. And I think Christopher Daniels is kind of like the same person. Everyone that watches, Ring of Honor, everyone that has been watching the Indies over the last 10 years knows how great Christopher Daniels is, and even TNA fans know how great Christopher Daniels is, from, him teaming up with Eel Skipper, him teaming up with Eel Skipper and Triple X, and what he's done in the X Division and the feuds with AJ Styles, the Samoa Joe feud, and the Triple Threat feud that pretty much is what made the X Division what it was back in the day in 2005, made the X Division as great as it was back then. Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, and AJ Styles. And Christopher Daniels is one of those stars that, he's a great wrestler. He can talk on the mic, and it's just a huge loss for TNA in the sense that you could have had someone right there that could have been, you could have established as a main event type guy, because he has everything that a wrestling company should look into. I mean, he can talk on the mic. He has a good character. He has a good look to himself. Looks completely different than a lot of wrestlers, I would say, for the most part. A good in-ring worker as well. And TNA really, completely failed with him. I mean, back in I think it was 2006, maybe 2007. I think it might have been 2006, where he had the feud building up with Sting, and it looked like Sting was going to put over Christopher Daniels, or TNA was going to go that route and maybe try to make Christopher Daniels into a main event star. They completely failed back then. So, like I said, TNA's loss of Christopher Daniels will be Ring of Honor's gain. This time in Ring of Honor, I will not mind if he becomes Ring of Honor champion at some point, because I think in Ring of Honor's history, I think he's the one guy that should have always been Ring of Honor champion at some point. I think everyone would say that he should have been the one to be Ring of Honor's second champion instead of Xavier. That was like the worst decision booking move in probably Ring of Honor history ever, having Xavier be the second Ring of Honor champion instead of Christopher Daniels being the second Ring of Honor champion over him. And then the next thing I want to give my thoughts on is Jim Cornette's recent comments and email that he sent Terry Taylor, and broke news that what he went a little too far in his email to Terry Taylor about his thoughts on Vince Russo. Now, Cornette, I would say in the email, he did go a little too far within the email. For people that haven't seen the email, which probably everyone has seen the email at this point right now, but just in case if you haven't seen the email, it will be in the description box below, and check it out if you haven't seen it yet. At first, I would say Cornette was kind of at the beginning of the email, when he was kind of like making a couple jokes and saying, I, wish the worst for Vince Russo. I wish if I could, if there wasn't a law against murdering someone, I wish I could murder Vince Russo. I think that was him just trying to be a little funny, but it was just in the worst way he could, do it. Then he went a little further later in the email, pretty much saying that he had been having dreams about killing Vince Russo. And within this email, I think people need to see it if you haven't seen it, because obviously within this, I think without seeing the email, everyone's going to be siding with Vince Russo, not Vince Russo, but Jim Cornette over Vince Russo. But in this sense, I would say that Cornette was in the wrong within this email. But in one sense, I think TNA and Vince Russo at some points have been going a little too far, because Vince Russo has been saying like he's fearful of his life, which Cornette is not going to go out his way and try to murder Vince Russo. This was just him talking and just talk. That was all it was. But it's one of those things where, when you go to the route of, saying you wish someone to be dead and kind of making subtle death threats in a little bit, that's kind of like when you break the barrier and cross the line of what free speech is. Because, free speech, everything's protected under free speech, but when you go to the route of, saying someone should be dead, or you wish someone's going to be dead, and you're kind of making subtle death threats, that's kind of crossing the line of what free speech is. That's really like the only thing I would say. Like, I'm one of those people that say everything should be, under free speech, but if you go the route of threatening someone's life, or not maybe threatening them, but subtle death threats, like, some of the comments Cornette put in this email to Terry Taylor, it's kind of crossing the barrier of what free speech is in that sense. And I will say Cornette was wrong in this sense, but like I said, TNA is blowing it out of proportion as well, because TNA has gone as far as, like I said, Vince Russo saying he's fearful of his life, and Cornette and TNA management, I think, saying that this email and these comments that not Vince Russo, but Jim Cornette made about Vince Russo were like a terrorist threat or something like that. And that's going a little too far. That's blown it out of proportion. But I will say Cornette was in the wrong in this email. And Cornette needs to understand, and anyone that does anything like this needs to understand, saying this type of stuff, you need to watch out what you say in certain emails to people. You need to watch out what you say, because some people could take it the wrong way. Like in this email, I would say that if Cornette didn't go as far as he did later on in the email, and just kind of kept it to like the little jokes and stuff he did at the beginning, it might have not been to the level where Terry Taylor, I guess TNA management thought, that, he was trying to, say he's going to go out his way and murder Vince Russo. So it's one of those things that I think most people, if they look at the email and just look past that it's, Cornette and Vince Russo, because everyone, I love Cornette a lot, and I think a lot of people hate Vince Russo, and everyone's going to pretty much side with Cornette just because of that. But I'm not siding with Vince Russo here, but I'm just going to say that Cornette was in the wrong here, but at the same time, I will say TNA has completely blown this out of proportion. And then the next thing is, obviously, you got the WWE draft coming up on April 26th, the night after Extreme Rules, and at this point, I'm not sure, what people are going to be switching brands. They might do their typical thing they do, switching the World Heavyweight title to Monday Night Raw and the WWE title to SmackDown. They might go that route. What I will say, the one thing I will guess is, for the most part, I don't know if they will go the route of switching the world titles again, but I'm saying that whoever loses the John Cena or Batista match, I'm saying one of them two is definitely going to be switching brands, just because I think after this match at Extreme Rules is going to be kind of like the end of their feud for this moment right now, and they're going to be split apart from each other because one's going to be on SmackDown and one's going to be on Monday Night Raw. And I will say with that, I would think it would be Batista going back to SmackDown instead of John Cena, but we don't know. They could go the route of maybe putting John Cena on SmackDown, because even though SmackDown is on Friday nights, and I don't think, even them moving to SyFy or anything is really going to change their, rating and how much viewership they get on Friday night. But if you put someone like John Cena on there and you put some people on there, someone like him with the star power or him, people might go out their way and check SmackDown out on Fridays, or more people might view it if you have someone of the star power and nature of a John Cena. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But the one great thing I'm going to love about the 3-hour draft is it's actually going to be the first time since June of 2009 that at this moment right now, at least at this moment right now, and it doesn't look like it's going to be a guest host on that Monday Night Raw, which is going to be a breath of fresh air that finally for one night there's not going to be a guest host on there. At this moment, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen because WWE has stated that they want to make sure that they don't have a guest host or something like a celebrity on there that night to make the main focus be the draft and not be the main focus, a celebrity or promoting a movie or something like that. So that's going to be the great thing about that 3-hour Monday Night Raw with the draft, that finally for one Monday Night Raw, even though it's only one Monday Night Raw at this point, that you're not going to have no guest hosts, no celebrities on there. That's going to be the best thing that's going to be happening there. They need to go ahead and end this guest hosting thing at some point. I don't know when they are going to plan on ending it at this point, because, a couple months ago I would have said, they're definitely going to be ending it, at WrestleMania or after WrestleMania, or do something to blow it off and end it at WrestleMania, maybe something with McMahon versus someone. If they didn't have the Bret Hart thing planned for WrestleMania, and they would have done that. But at this point, it looks like they're never going to be ending this guest hosting thing. But hey, at least on April 26th with the 3-hour draft on Monday Night Raw, for one night we won't have a celebrity guest host. So that's going to be a breath of fresh air right there. So just wanted to come on here and give my thoughts on a couple of wrestling-related topics and news topics. Like I said, wanted to give my thoughts on the Jim Cornette comments about Vince Russo. Like I said, I thought he was out of line and did go a little too far, but I think at the same time TNA has blown it out of proportion. Swagger being champion, I think, is a good thing, but hopefully they don't have him lose the title at Extreme Rules. Hopefully they at least allow him to have at least a 2 to 3 month title reign. I don't expect him to have any longer than a 2 to 3 month title reign, but hopefully he passes Extreme Rules as champion. And want to give my thoughts on SmackDown moving to SyFy, the SyFy network later this fall in October or September. Forgot which month it was at this point. And Daniels officially being with Ring of Honor now. And like I said, TNA's loss with Christopher Daniels and them not using him to the level they should have will be Ring of Honor's gain. He'll definitely work great in Ring of Honor. I definitely can't wait to see his match that he has against Davey Richards. I think they'll probably do that match at the May 8th Ring of Honor show in New York. That's one of the matches I do see happening and taking place at that show. Davey Richards versus Christopher Daniels. Maybe doing something like a #1 contenders match for the World Heavyweight title. That'd be, something you could possibly do against those two. And yeah, that's it for my wrestling thoughts I want to give on these certain topics. All right, peace.